Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BodhiBrew, offering advantage through insight. I'm your host, Confidi Kong, Creative Director of Bodhi Research Group. In today's episode, we cover Legends Lounge, which former President and CEO Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, Claude Lamoureux, and our founder and CEO, Dr. Ranjan Bhaduri. An actuary by training, Claude was the President and CEO of OTPP from 1990 to his retirement in 2007. Before 1990, Claude spent 25 years as a senior financial executive with a Metropolitan Life in Canada and the U.S. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a cup of brew with us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of BodhiBrew, a Legends Lounge episode, and this is a very, very special treat. We have Claude with us. And previous to this episode beginning, Claude asked me what should we speak about. I stated to him that one doesn't tell Picasso what to paint. And so it's a tremendous honor, though, to have you here, Claude. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here, but I don't think I'm Picasso.
I will state this, that Canada's known for pensions being world-class. All around the world, there's a lot of appreciation for what Canadian pensions have done and are doing. And Ontario Teachers Pension Plan really allowed for that possibility in that if you had not been so successful at Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, I very much doubt that CPP, OMERS, CDPQ, and so forth, all of these groups would not have had the chance. Like the Canadian pensions, the Maple model, you're the creator, and your success allowed for other groups to have the opportunity. Of course, every group has taken its own path, but I think when you think about it in those terms, the amount of good that you have done across so many different regions, it's enormous.
Well, we were lucky to have a good board to start with. You know, I think that the board, one person that had a lot of influence on the board was Jerry Bowie, and he helped the government and the Ontario Teachers Federation, better known as OTF, to select good board members. And I think this helped us to be able to do things that maybe had not been done in the past. In fact, one of the board members went on to become chair of CPPIB, Gail Cook-Bennett. And I think that in part, like a teacher, Jerry Bowie used to tell me, Claude, we're here to establish a foundation. It has to be a good foundation. And I think that Gail did the same for CPP.
No, it's very true, and you've been very generous with your time over the past few years, over breakfasts and other meetings, and I've learned a lot from you. I continue to learn a lot from you, and I think today what I'd love to do is for you to share a little bit about the Maple model, as well as we will talk about governance and directorships and so forth, but maybe just giving a little bit of the story about that, highlighting what you believe also is important for a pension to have success today.
Well, I'll give you my example. I testified in front of the Senate when the CPP started, CPPIB started, and when PSPIB started. And in both occasions, my speech in great part was, you need an expert board. You need people who are knowledgeable. That does not preclude having people from the, let's say members. But when you're looking at investment, especially on a large scale, where you have to be fairly sophisticated, having a good board of teachers made a big difference. And from there, when I was hired, Jerry Bowie asked me at a luncheon, how would I run this? And I said, like a corporation. And then he asked me, what does that mean? So I mentioned to him that I was a big fan of management by objective. I wanted to make sure that, management had enough latitude to do things, even to make mistakes. And, you could see even the salaries. I said, we need competitive salary, otherwise we train people that will go elsewhere. And Jerry never flinched. And at the end he said, "Are you going to join us?" I said, "Yep, I'm going to join you." And, so having a good board makes a big difference. Having the right people also makes a big difference. I think if you look at the book From Good to Great of Jim Collins, getting the right people on the bus is very important. And getting the wrong people off the bus is also important. So at Teachers, I spent a lot of time recruiting, and I always used to tell the people in charge of HR, if I can make a difference to hire somebody, I'll stop any meeting, and I'll give you 15, 20 minutes to talk, to tell them what's our vision, what we want to accomplish here. And again, I've done a lot of recruiting in my life, and to me, this is one of the most important things. Get the right people. And I was lucky enough to hire, as the Chief Investment Officer, Bob Bertram, that I had known. I did a transaction in my prior job, and I got to meet Bob. And this was a company owned by a number of Canadian pension plans, and Bob was certainly the leader of the group. And it turned out to be a fantastic hire, and we worked together for 17 years. And, most of the time we saw eye to eye on most issues. And if he wanted to start something new, my first reaction was more go to it as opposed to let's think about it.
Sure. No, that's and that really dovetails into the culture, right? Because the culture, it comes from the top, the leadership and the people. And maybe you could comment on culture and how to create the right kind of culture, and what you had done at Ontario Teachers, as well as what might be, methods to achieve that in today's.
In my prior life at Metropolitan Life, we did a lot of survey of the employees. And I always found these surveys to be very useful. So when I started at Teachers, that's what I did with all the employees. And it's amazing what you learn. Are they happy? Are they unhappy? Do they think they have a good supervisor, manager? And, it turned out that the survey was not positive. But as a consultant told me, almost anything you will do will make a difference. And, I repeated these surveys throughout my career. Every couple of years we had a survey, and sometimes every year, because it's important to know what the employees feel. And also another thing that I do, that I've done throughout my career, is meet with people, small group of people, 10, 12 people, and just talk. Answer their questions. And it's amazing how much you learn about the organization, about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. After 15, 20 minutes, for most people, you're just another person. You're not superior or anybody like that. And so they tell you things that, and you have to have an open mind and make sure that people can tell you things that will be useful. But most people, if things don't go well, you got to listen to them. And so I learned there. I walked the floor every day, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. And again, when you have everybody in the same building, it's easy to go on every floor every day and talk to people. And if you see a group, it gives you an opportunity to say, what are you working on? What's happening? Why? And sometimes you can help people, but you got to show that you care about what they do. And the other thing that is extremely important is providing good service to the members. And in the case of a pension plan, and of the teachers' pension plan, these are former and current teachers. Again, you got to treat them like clients. Previously, when the government ran the place, if you wanted to retire, you had to give a notice of 1 year. Mm-hmm. You look at that and you say, this is impossible,
Sure.
but how do you learn that? By talking to the employees. A lot of letters and not bid handle, and again, even the employees know it doesn't make sense.
No, that is very important, and I will give a recent story that just happened a week ago from this podcaster a couple of weeks ago. My older brother is actually a retired school teacher from Ontario, so he took early retirement and he receives the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. He receives that pension, and he has been retired a couple of years now, and he's recently started doing substitute teaching. And there currently is a rule in Ontario about the maximum number of days a retired teacher can do substitute teaching. And a couple of weeks ago, he received a text stating that he's one away from that limit. And if he were to go in for one more, it would impact the pension that the monthly pay, and that's all very transparent. Those are the rules. But the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan Services did such a good job because they were keeping track of this, and they sent my brother a text. He wasn't keeping track to that point. I hope he doesn't mind my stating this publicly, but he didn't know that he was reaching the limit, so it saved him his monthly pension, and that is excellent client service. Like, he was very, very grateful.
Well, even when I left, but probably even better today, people could retire, in the middle of the night. If you have a computer system that can answer all the questions, and if somebody is not too familiar, at least at the time, people could call and use their computer to talk to somebody and have a dialogue. But after a while, people would retire in the middle of the night. And to me, that's the important thing, is that to be able to provide top-notch service. Today, I read an article in a Montreal paper about how long it takes in the province of Quebec to get a death certificate. Mm-hmm. On average, it takes 40 days.
Wow.
But again, the government can make you wait because they make the rule. Mm-hmm. But if you look at that as a private sector firm, it would never happen.
Yes.
And that's why at Teachers, my goal was not to just, provide good service. You want to make sure it is the best service. And there's an organization called Cost Effectiveness Measurement, for instance, that measure the service of pension plan. And I think every pension plan, especially those that are involved with paying pensions, should be a member. The initial survey, the difference between the best and the worst was very big. Over the years, everybody has improved, and the difference between the best and the worst has narrowed. So it shows you that when you compare yourself, you learn a lot. And, every year they have a meeting, they show why some people are better. And I must say that teachers have always been pretty much in the top. But that was not the case, let's say, in the first 5 or 7 years. If we had done that kind of survey, we would have been probably like a lot of pension plans, and maybe worse than most, because the service was not there. And don't forget, when a teacher retires, they have a lot of money. Most mutual fund would be very, very happy to have these people as clients. So I would remind our employees all the time that these people don't have a choice. We have a monopoly. So it is very important for us to provide top-notch service. And I think that the teacher in general, and the example you gave is an example of where you can be proactive. You don't have to wait and say, I got you. And the fact that they use a text, to me, it's a plus.
No, I immediately thought of you and some of what you've taught me about service. And yes.
And the people in member services, initially the phone would take minutes to answer the phone. My standard was somebody should not wait more than 1 minute. And then I install subway sign all over the place to let people know how many people were waiting on the phone. What was the longest wait time? And, but just putting that made a big difference, because suddenly the people could see, and if somebody waited more than a minute, there was a bell that rang. And a bell ringing and Claude being on the floor was a great combination.
Oh gosh, you've hit upon a lot of excellent points, and maybe I'm going to ask you. You mentioned about the culture and getting the surveys and just meeting with folks regularly and really not being. The corollary of that is just not being detached from the organization and the team in terms of just being in meetings and so forth, and really knowing across the organization. In the post-pandemic world, it's no longer a situation where everybody's in the office every single day and so forth. How do you make the adjustments for today? What would you tell an executive?
In member services, it's easy to have people working from home. But in the investment department, personally, I think it's good to have people in the office, because you learn a lot from the people that are there. And, if you're in equity and you talk to somebody in fixed income, and, I've always said when 2 or 3 of our teams were working in transactions, that's when we came up with the best idea. And if people work from home, you don't have the same interaction.
Yes.
So my pitch there, but I would want the people at least 4 days a week in the office if you're in investment. And if you look at system, there are things that can be done while you're working at home. But again, you need to have meetings every day of the people. And so, there are areas where you need the people to be there more often. Maybe 4 days on occasion. It could be 5 in certain job. But, member services, a lot of the work could be done from home.
Got it.
But investment, I have doubt, because you learn a lot from the people and that you meet just taking a cup of coffee.
Of course.
Somebody saw something in the paper. What are you doing about this?
Yes.
It creates opportunity. And if you're at home, the tendency is, am I going to call Ranjan to bother him? Nah, I'll wait. And then the opportunity goes away. So that's how I would feel today. But you have to be conscious that the employees also have options.
Yes.
And if you're too inflexible, you might lose some good employees. So if somebody has good reason to want to stay home more, well, maybe you got to listen to that.
Sure. No, that's fair. And governance is something that you're known globally about, the work that you've done in governance, and that was a big part, as you mentioned, the board, having a strong board, independent board. What would you say makes a good director?
Let me start, where I'm very pleased what the kind of work we've done in Canada on governance is we've separated the role of chair and CEO. And this has been, and most people don't know the story, but how we started, we were 4 people: Michael Wilson, David Beatty, Steve Jaroslawski, and myself. And where did we start? Initially, our idea was we were going to change the law. Well, Bill Braithwaite told us, this is going to take too long. Why don't you go and just talk to the top companies? And sure enough, we started with the banks. And then David Beatty went along and talked to practically every big company across Canada. But today, this is accepted. And to me, it's very important to have the separation of chair and CEO. But what makes a good director is somebody who can ask good questions, somebody who's not afraid to say no. There's homework to be done when you're on a board. But the homework is more than just reading the material that is sent to you. You have to be curious. And on the board of a pension plan, you have to follow investment. You have to, and at teachers, we've been lucky to have a Jerry Bowie, Ted Medlin, when I was there, Robin Courtaulds, Jean Turmel, people that are really, who love investment and who can ask you tough questions. With Robin Courtaulds, because I've worked with many years with him, he passed away this year. He would ask a question, generally it was easy. But by the time he asked the second and third question, I always had to think, where is he going with this? Because he had a great way to teach you that maybe your idea was not as good as you thought.
Wow,
But a good director is somebody who shows up, asks questions, is not afraid to have an opinion, and doesn't just go with the flow. Because why do we have many directors? It's so that people can ask questions. And sometimes it's what I call the stupid questions. Are we going to make money with this? Do we have the manpower to do this? I mean, what looks like an easy question, but it turns out that in the end, nobody asked the questions.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that curiosity, that independence, it reminds me of the late physicist, Nobel-winning prize physicist Richard Feynman, who he had been put on a committee I think it was in the 1980s, when the Challenger had exploded. They wanted to review why this happened, and he was put on that task force committee. And he had exactly that view. I'm not just going to go with the flow. He would be asking questions, going into information that wasn't just provided, and so forth, and it led him to find out what the problem was. So
the other thing that is very important, management has a big responsibility to educate the board. Mm-hmm. And to bring information, and not just positive information for what they want, but also, the pros and cons of something. And you always have to bring good material to your board. And sometimes if you see things that is not even related to what you do immediately, it's good to send papers. You'd be interested, about this. This is something that you should read, because it makes them better director. And director, like if you want auditor and people in risk, to me they're there to help us do a better job. And when you look at auditors, a lot of people, they want to pay the least amount, mm-hmm. and they want them to get out as quickly as possible. In my mind, good auditors are your partners. They're there to help you. And you want them to really do a good job as opposed to just getting out. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with risk people. You're sure you want to take this risk. You're sure you want to do that. Here are some of the implications that you have not seen. And we have to appreciate these people. They're very important for an organization, no matter how big or how small it is.
No, absolutely. That's something that I think is, if I can say, I know that has helped Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan enormously. That strength on the risk side. So in terms of that, do you feel like that's a common mistake in the industry in terms of pensions, undervaluing or underestimating the importance from a risk management or operations perspective?
Well, in some places, I think it is. But it is changing. Everybody is aware. To have somebody like Barbara Svan, who did a fabulous work in terms of projecting where the fund was going to be. One of the big risks that people, underestimate is demography. Mm-hmm. And so when you run the pension plan, you really have to look at your demography. And if it's a pyramid, makes it easy. But when it gets to be an inverted pyramid, it's a lot tougher. I talked to somebody who runs a pension plan recently where they have twice as many retirees than active.
Yes.
And I said, wow, because if you have a bad year or two, mm-hmm. You cannot just ask the people that are active to make up the difference, and you cannot just increase the contribution ad infinitum. So it's one of those things that people have to watch.
It's a very dynamic landscape because that's at the heart of everything, right? Like for a pension, to avoid an asset liability mismatch and the inflows that are coming in and the outflows, and that because it's so dynamic, one has to be, exactly as you stated, it's something that has to be analyzed very, very carefully, continuously.
And you can learn a lot from other pension funds. I'll give you my example. The first time I heard of a pension fund that had the retirees participate in the risk is from the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, this is a great idea. This is the sort of thing that we need to do. And eventually, we started, when I was there, we started the process, but then Jim Leach and Barbara Svan were able to convince the teachers to do that. And at the end, what you want to make sure is that the pension plan exists 100 years from now, not just for the next 6 months.
Yes.
And that's the sort of decisions that you have to make that will pay dividend down the road.
No, absolutely. Again, the kind of work that was done during your tenure, the innovations that you brought on in terms of the kinds of investments and then building that whole infrastructure, that really was the creation of the Maple model. And looking at it today, you see how much it's flourished in terms of pensions across the country of Canada. What advice do you have, or what ideas do you have that you would say to young professionals working at a pension?
Well, if you work in investment, this is a 24-hour-a-day job, 7 days a week. Because you can read the paper and pick up ideas. You can, it's one of those things that you can always think about, how would that affect what we're doing? And, to me, you have to be very curious. And if you talk about people in the administration side or the IT side, you have to appreciate the kind of service that you provide, why you're providing it. You always have to, and is there a better way to do it? To me, you should never stop innovating because there's always better ways to do things. And, because it was good, you can always make it better.
Yes, absolutely. And this, you just answered the question that I was about to ask, but I will ask it nonetheless. And that is, there's a difference between success and surviving success, having that success for the long, long run. And it's indisputable that Canadian pensions, most of them have had a lot of success. What are the dangers in terms of, what do you need to do to avoid losing that success and getting, to be able to survive that success?
It's the same as any corporation. You have success, you take it for granted, you're less hungry, you don't do the extra, and eventually you become average and maybe mediocre. Mm-hmm. So you always have to question yourself, and you always have to find ways to improve and to do things better. And there's always a challenge in almost anything. But you can look at many corporations that were very successful, but eventually they don't innovate as much. They become, complacent. They pay big salaries, and people say, "Oh, it's because." At the end of the day, it's not because of, I work for this corporation. Yes. No. It's because everybody has to be committed to do things better every day. And if you don't do that, eventually you become mediocre.
No,
and some companies, you can see big companies. I've been reading recently a lot about Boeing, which was a very successful company. But the management became mesmerized by the price of the stock. And at the end, they didn't manage the plane. They were watching the the price of the stock. It's amazing how many companies have done that. GE recently was split in three companies. 15 years ago, if you had told me that, I would have never believed it. No. But you can see how a company becomes complacent, and they made mistakes along the way. By the way, being in business means you can make mistakes.
Sure.
But in the case of a pension fund, if you make a mistake and the pensions are not getting paid, a lot of people, are hurt.
Of course.
So in the pension industry, you work at CPP, you work at any pension plan. You got to make sure that your contribution improves, and if there's, I'll give you an example. Home Capital, I was on the board. I tried to convince two pension plans to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
None of them came up to even look at the book. Why? Well, we understand this is going, it's really in trouble. No. I'm telling you, I've just joined the board. It's not in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So, who saved the company? One guy out of Omaha who never came to Toronto and look at the financials.
Yes.
He didn't even have to come and visit. He looked at the financials and he said, I want to buy 40% of this company. But two Canadian pension funds didn't have the time to show up to even look at the books.
It's amazing.
So you look at that, you say, are you hungry? And every day there's opportunities. This week I talked to somebody who's in the automobile electric network. And, I know this guy, and so I called him. I said, what are you going to do? I mean, Tesla just fired his whole group. I said, this is a great opportunity for you. Mm-hmm. You should go and talk to the top guy and try to hire him and try to hire his team. That doesn't mean it will happen.
Sure, but you have to be thinking, you have to be trying.
But
yes.
I once gave a talk to a group of lawyers that below the partners level. And this is years ago when every paper was printed. So maybe there's 20 or 25 of them there. And I asked, what's the biggest business story in today's paper? Not a word. How many of you read the Globe this morning? Maybe 4, 5?
Yeah.
So my reaction was, you all want to become partners. To become partners, you got to bring business to the organization. How are you going to do that? I mean, you got to look at the papers. You got to look, what's happened here. Here's a company in trouble. I can help you. But it was amazing to me that these people thought the work was going to come. And it's the same thing with pension plan. Innovation and administration, you got to look outside of your area.
Yes.
Innovation and investment, there's always opportunities. People always say, oh, times are tough today. Well, they were tough in 1990. They were tough in 1940. They're always tough.
Yes.
But how come some people are successful and others are not? Is that you got to be hungry and you got to be, call somebody, make a call. The worst you'll get is no, we're not interested. But there are opportunities every day.
I love it, what you just said, and I couldn't agree more. And I've, in my experience, my limited experience, it's the two biggest enemies to an organization are complacency and hubris. And it's always, will lead to, to failure and to a downfall. And just to make it light, I mean, for those Rocky 3 for the Rocky Balboa series, that's the life lesson from Rocky 3 is exactly that if you can be the champion, But if you don't continue to work hard, don't continue to be hungry, you're going to lose it and lose it fast. So it has been a huge honor to have you here, Claude, and the wisdom that you've shared, and the good that you've done for so many people. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, my pleasure. And I think I've always told you, your organization, has a great role to play in the investment business. Because again, if you have a car with a very strong motor, you need brakes that are even better than the motor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.